Hi guys, so this week we are going to be doing the coordinate geometry section for the math part, and then just reviewing science by just doing one passage together. So for coordinate geometry today we're going to start with going over how to find the slope between 2 points, how to graph a line, and then looking at parallel and perpendicular lines. So first thing, we are on page 312 here, is going over how to find the slope when you're given 2 points. So they're going to give you an x1, a y1, and then an x2, y2, 2 points. You need to subtract the y's on top over the x's on bottom. Sometimes they call this the yum-yums on the picnic table because it kind of looks like a picnic table going on. But just remember, it's rise over run. So the y's are always on top, x's are on bottom, and we're subtracting to find our slope. So this first page here, it wants us to plot these points to graph the line and then answer some questions about it. So I'm going to go ahead and graph these first. Remember that the first coordinate is the x coordinate, and then the second is the y. So the first one tells you how you're moving left or right. The second one tells you up or down. So for the point -4, -5, if I start here at the origin, I'm going to go left 4 units and then down 5 units, and then plot that point. Okay, next point is -2, -1. So again, go left 2, down 1. 1, 5 means I'm going to go right 1 and up 5. And then 3, 9, so right 3, up 9. So then I can go ahead and graph my line here. So it says use the points 1, 5, and 3, 9 to calculate the slope. Doesn't matter which one is x1, y1, which one's x2, y2. So if I just call this one x1, y1, x2, y2, I'm going to be subtracting, right? So I'm going to have m equals, so y2 minus y1, so 9 minus 5 on top, and then 3 minus 1 on bottom, gives me 4 over 2, so my slope is 2. At what y value does the line cross the y-axis? So we're looking, at the y-axis right here. Where does it cross that line? This point right here is at 0, 3. So the y value is 3. And then the second part is asking what is the x value. So that's here, which is 0. So here is the equation in slope-intercept form of a line. The m stands for the slope. E stands for the y-intercept, or where the graph crosses the y-axis. The x and y stand for an ordered pair or a point on the line. And then what is the equation in slope-intercept form of line 1? So it would be y equals, our slope we found was 2. So 2x plus, and then our y-intercept we got was 3. So y equals 2x plus 3. Okay, so same type of thing here. I'm going to go ahead and plot these points to make my line. So -6, 8. -2, 5. 2, 2, and then 6, -1. Okay, so use 2 of your ordered pairs to calculate the slope. I'm going to use these two. It doesn't matter which ones you pick. I like to use the positive numbers if I can. So to find my slope here, I'll do -1 minus 2 over 6 minus 2. So -3 over 4, that can't be simplified, so that is my slope, -3/4. Number 2, use the slope and one of your ordered pairs to solve for the y-intercept. Okay, so I'm going to use the point 2, too. Again, I like to use positive numbers. That's easier for me. Then we found that m is equal to -3/4. So what I want to do is set up my equation here. Y equals mx plus b, and then I'm going to plug in what I know. my point gives me my x and my y value, and then I know my slope is negative 3/4. So I'll get 2 equals negative 3/4 times 2 plus b. And then I just need to solve for b. This gives me 2 equals. When I multiply here, I can actually simplify, and I get negative 3/2, okay, plus b. So then to solve for b, I just need to add this over. So I'm going to add the positive 3/2 over. So 2 plus 3/2 gives me b equals 7/2. So then put them together to write my equation. Y equals negative 3/4 x plus b, which was 7/2. Okay, for these next three, it wants you to find the equations of the lines using the points given, and then we're going to go ahead and graph those. So I'm going to use my 2 positive points here, find my slope. So subtracting, I get 6 minus 5 over 4 minus 2, so 1/2. So y equals 1/2 x. And then I need to find the plus b, the y-intercept. But if you notice, they actually give us the y-intercept for all of these problems. It's the point where it crosses the y-axis, or the point when x equals 4, or I'm sorry, x equals 0. And so that tells us that that b is going to be 4. So I can actually find my equation pretty easily here. So same type of thing for these next two. When I subtract, remember this becomes addition, so you just get 1/2. So y equals 1/2 x. Again, they give us the y-intercept, so minus 6. And then my last one. That becomes addition, so I get negative 4 over 2. So just negative 2. So y equals negative 2x. Y-intercept is positive 2, so plus 2. So it wants us to graph these 3 lines now, and I'm going to actually practice graphing the lines. Instead of using all of my points and plotting them, I'm just going to use the equations. So for line number 3, it was y equals 1/2 x plus 4. Now, the y-intercept is where I'm going to start. That is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So I'm going to plot my first point at positive 4 here. And then this, remember, is my slope, which is rise over run. So I'm going to go up 1 and right 2, and that gives me my next point. I really only need 2 points, but I usually graph a couple just to make this a little more accurate here. Okay, and then that gives me my first line. So that was line number 3. 4 was 1/2 x minus 6, so I'm going to start down here at negative 6. Slope is the same, so up 1, right 2. And then that's 4. Last one, 5, was negative 2x plus 2. Starting up here at 2, my slope is negative 2, which means I need to go down 2 and right 1. Okay, so what do we notice about these lines? What's the relationship between 3 and 4? It's not perfect, but they should be parallel, which means they never intersect. And if we look back at their slopes, notice that they are the same. They are both 1/2. Okay, so every time 2 lines have the same slope, they are going to be parallel lines. And then if we look at lines 3 and 5, again, not perfect here, but they should cross to form a right angle, which means they are perpendicular. If we look back at the slopes, one is 1/2 and the other one is negative 2. These are called opposite reciprocal slopes. So we switch the signs and we flip the fraction. When you see that, you know that those lines are going to be perpendicular. Last thing, we want to graph these lines and then look at the reflections here. So first one, line number 6, is 3x plus 5. So again, I'm going to graph this using my slope and my y-intercept. Y-intercept is 5, and my slope is 3. Okay, so that's line number 6. 7, it's negative 3x plus 5, so I still start at 5, but then I'm going to go down 3, right 1. My last one is negative 3x minus 5, so now starting down here at negative 5, slope is negative 3. Okay, so if you notice before I move here, we're going to be comparing lines 6 and 7. These are going to be reflected across the y-axis for 6 and 7, right? You can see that it, like, if you fold it over, it would lie on top of itself. And then if we look at 6 and 8, they're going to be reflected across the x-axis. Okay, it folds on top of itself. But let's go ahead and fill these in. So line 7 is a reflection of line 6 across which axis? We said that was the y-axis. What happens to the slopes? They are opposite, and the y-intercepts are the same. So if you notice this, okay, then you know that that's going to be a reflection across the y-axis. Looking at lines 6 and 8, we said those were reflected across the x-axis. The slopes are opposite, and the y-intercepts are opposite, which will always be true for lines that are reflected across the x-axis. Okay, so now I want you to turn to page 321. You can pause the video because I want you to try and work through these problems on your own, and then once you've done that, you can go ahead and hit play, finish this up, and check your answers. Okay, so question 1, what is the slope of a line that's parallel to the line described by this equation? So our first step is we want to get this into slope-intercept form so we can easily see what the slope of this line is. So remember that is y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to go ahead and solve for y. So let's start by subtracting 6x. So I get 3y equals negative 6x plus 9. And then divide by 3. Make sure over on the right side you divide both parts by 3. So negative 2x plus 3 is the equation of that line. So then the question is, what's the slope of the line that's perpendicular to this? Well, the slope of this line is negative 2, and remember, parallel lines have the same slope. So it will also have a slope of negative 2. So the answer here is A. Number 4, which of the following pairs of points yields a line with a slope of 3? So this is kind of annoying because really you should probably check every single one. If you're just starting with F to find your slope here, you would do, if you did 9 minus 4 over 3 minus 2, that would be 5 over 1, which is 5. The question is which one gives us a slope of 3, so I know this one is not right. So if you check all of them, you should get the answer is K. If I do 10 minus 4 over 9 minus 7, that gives me 6 over 2, which is 3. Number 12, what is the slope of a line that's perpendicular to the line given by this equation? So same thing, I want to solve for y, get this in slope-intercept form, figure out what the slope is, and then remember for perpendicular, I need to think that's opposite reciprocal slopes. So, solving for y here, I'm going to subtract the 10x. I get negative 8y equals negative 10x plus 16, and then divide by negative 8. So y equals, so it becomes a positive, right? And when I simplify that fraction there, I get 5 over 4x minus 2. So my slope here is 5/4. And so when I do the opposite reciprocal of that, I change it to a negative, I flip the fraction to get 4/5. So negative 4/5 is my answer, which is F. And then last one, where do the graphs of these two lines intersect. So, couple ways of doing this. If you have a graphing calculator and you're good with the graphing feature, you can graph both of these lines and just find the intersection point, which is probably faster if you're good at this, but I know that we don't all have graphing calculators, so I'm going to show you the second method. Your first step is to get these both into y equals mx plus b form. This one is already set up, so we're good. This one we want to solve for y here. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract the x and the 6 over. So I get 2y equals negative x minus 6, and then divide by 2. So y equals negative 1/2 x minus 3. Now that these are both set up as y equals something, we can actually set these equal to each other and solve to see where they intersect. Okay, so I'm going to set these equal. 3x plus 1 equals negative 1/2 x minus 3. So I want to get the x's on one side, numbers on the other, so I'll add that 1/2 x over, and I'm also going to subtract the 1 over to the right side. When I add these, if I get a common denominator, this gives me 7/2 times x equals negative 4. To get x by itself here, I'm going to multiply by 2 over 7. Okay, which gives me x equals negative 8/7. And in this case, there's only one answer that has that x value, so I know my answer is C. If you came to some answers that had that same x value, and you had to decide between the two, that's when you would go back and plug in that x value into either of your equations to solve for y. All right, great, that's it for today.